46 games, 22 wins, 66 goals scored, 33 conceded, 20 league clean sheets and League Two's best home record. That's just a snapshot of some of the numbers from Cambridge United's promotion-winning season from League Two. A season built on the EFL's best defensive record, giving United a third-place finish on the magic number of 82 points and an instant return to the third tier. Welcome to the Under the Abbey Stand season review show and awards night, where after such a brilliant season, it's a real pleasure to be able to take a moment to look back on it all and relive every moment, because God knows it's not always been that way. I've got some panellists with me. Jordan Warland, it's a pleasure to see you again. It's the second time in a week we're doing an in-person pod.
I know, I love it. Love it. I love seeing your face.
Thanks, mate.
I cut my hair especially for the award show. Swindle noticed.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Hair, that's not the first time that haircutting is going to come into this show as well, is it?
I just loved your intro there, all the things you listed off, and just in my head I thought you were going to go full Big John and just go Bosh or something. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, what a terrific set of statistics to get us going, and yeah, possibly one of the best season reviews we've ever done in this recording studio.
Probably, I'd imagine. Yeah. Maybe that first year back in League One when we finished 14th, whatever, would have been a nice positive one, but definitely one of the best. Tom Walker's here. How are you, Tommy?
He is here. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, no, you're right. It's good good to be sat here not picking through the bones of basically getting beat every week.
Yeah.
It's kind of basically the opposite, really. Good to note in your intro that we've effectively built ourselves an incredible platform to get promoted, which is always good. It's always nice to keep a clean sheet. And yeah, it's just good looking back through it, you know. I think I was chatting to Swindle just before we started. It is a bit of a weird season to kind of review because I don't think it's like sections up as well. Maybe as other seasons, if that makes sense. Like we were kind of a little bit stuttery and then excellent, and that's it. And that's why we got promoted.
Small wobble at the end.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that small wobble at the end is maybe one of the talking points. Maybe we'd section it up in two parts. Maybe there's up until November and then post-November, maybe a little bit. But we'll come on to that. Jack Swindlehurst is here as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just happy that we're not recording before a League Two playoff final at Wembley.
I know.
That's the thing. I'm glad we don't have the heartbreak and the turmoil.
You would have to say as well that probably recording your season review before the playoff final takes place, if you're in the playoff final, would be quite a bold move.
It would probably mean we'd lost in the semis, wouldn't it? So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's a good point.
So we'd all be sat here going, "Thank God we don't have to sit in the heat at Wembley again."
Yeah, my God. Yeah, well, Monday's supposed to be the hottest day of this heatwave as well, isn't it? That would be an absolute mess. How was it watching the League Two playoff semi-final, second legs? Have you been keeping an eye on them, Swindle?
Not at all. I've switched off from football completely. I just don't care about football anymore. I know there's a World Cup happening, so I'll probably watch that. But yeah, it's just been so nice to get to the beach.
Get on the beach. Yeah, absolutely.
I watched the Notts County two legs. Was it like 2 shots on target? Get yourself to Wembley.
Yeah, I love it.
Great stuff.
That's Neil Harris is clapping at that. He's loving it. Fist pumping at that all night long. Look, this is how today's going to work. We're going to do a month-by-month look back over the season, relive every moment, as I said in the intro, and then at the end we're going to do our awards. We've already got a few awards in from the Director of Football and CEO, which you have to be a Coconut Team member to listen to that section of the show. So if you're not already, go and check that out, and you can hear what Mark Bonner and Alex Tunbridge had to say. I think some good nominations there, Jord.
My favourite part of that was our friend Bond squirming when we asked for Villain of the Year.
Yeah.
He's like, that's not my brand. That's not what I do. I was like, I've got thousands.
Yeah. But I did find that bit tougher this year, like the worst bits, because there wasn't anywhere near as many to pick from as other seasons where it was a complete flip. Anyway, before that, we're going to rewind a year basically, and go back to last pre-season, June, July 2025 sort of time. A few signings here to list. Ben Knight signs on the 3rd of June. Couldn't remember it being that early. It
was with the club supposedly since what, January?
January,
training?
I think. Yeah. Well, maybe let's just start right there. I mean, when Ben Knight signs, Tom, I remember you putting in the group like, okay, this has probably got like quite a high ceiling or like quite high potential as a player. But mainly, I remember the thing you said was it would be mental if we hadn't have signed him. Like if a local boy like that with his pedigree had gone to like Barnet or Colchester, I can't remember the example you give, then it would feel mental. And that has come out to be completely true, because say he'd had this season and we hadn't picked him up, you'd look back on it and think, well, why haven't you gone and signed this local boy? He's on your doorstep, right?
Yeah, you just know he would have got on to sign for like Notts County, and he would have been absolutely excellent. It's funny you say that, because it would have been mental not to sign him, and it was mental that we didn't sign him when he was first.
When he was first in. Yeah.
I guess that's a good way to summarise the previous manager's eye for talent, I guess.
And director of football.
I think it was. I think it was also kind of risk free. I think it's just one of those where obvious potential, obvious connection to the club. It would have been a bit strange. And I think it was a good way to start off our kind of business, really, because it was quite a good signal of intent that we were maybe going a slightly different way with things than we had done before. And I think obviously recruitment was an area that we basically tore our collective hair out about for like 3 or 4 years previous, particularly the season before this one. So yeah, I think to start off in a way which was just like good, obvious, solid business, I think was nice. And to be fair, yeah, I thought there was a pretty high ceiling on it, and that's probably not too much of a hot take, because he did play for Manchester City, who are like
exactly.
one of the best teams on the planet, and he basically the best manager, or arguably the best manager of all time, knows who he is. So that's quite a good indicator of his potential, his ability. But it's probably gone better than I could have expected, really, or any of us, maybe any of us could have expected. Maybe people who like know a bit more about Ben Knight and his background might not be as surprised as maybe I am about just how involved he was. Like I've said it throughout the season on the pod. Like I think just in terms of the way he plays, and we'll chat about his impact on games later on in more detail, but just the way that he was so desperate to be involved in things and was involved in things, probably more than you could expect. Like a lot of these, you probably see it more when you sign people on like first youth loans and stuff, like coming out of academies. Like they do shy away a lot. You can tell that like how many players we had through the years. Like Don Ballard's a good example the season before of like a player who you could tell there was something there, but it just wasn't ready for it. And then lo and behold, the next team like reaped the rewards of it. We've kind of had that with Ben Knight, so it's good that the boot's on our foot for a change, not the other foot. That's a bit of a hatchet job of a
4 minutes in, good stuff.
I know what you mean.
I've just had a couple of flashbacks talking about Ben Knight in June. So Ben Knight would have been the first player reveal after the rebranding with the new badge and all that. So first off, last summer, that video, Wes as a postman, got to slip that into the review somewhere.
Fantastic.
Got to get Wes in there.
Yeah.
But I remember, this is the random flashback, Tom, and I could be wrong, but when Ben Knight was announced, he was wearing a T-shirt, and at the time he went, that T-shirt's class, I'm getting it. And I'm pretty sure it's that T-shirt you're wearing right now.
No, it's not.
Is it not?
No, it's not. It's a different one. It's a different one.
Oh, well.
That would be a real full circle moment, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That's why I sort of just thought it just then. But then also another like highlight from pre-season was, randomly bumping into you two at Braintree away. Where were we pre-season?
Yeah.
We hadn't planned
July.
to do it,
Yeah.
and we sat next to each other, which was lovely. And Ben Knight came on like second half, and you're like,
he's
this is
fantastic,
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good memory. Yeah, there was a lot of excitement about him going into the season. It probably took a little bit longer than we might have expected at that point for him to really show it. But we'll come on to that. June 23rd, we signed Ben Purrington and Don Ball, which I guess at that point, you're sort of looking at two players there, like really experienced for the level. As a profile of a player that Neil Harris' squad wants to be built around, these two made a lot of sense, didn't they, Jord?
Yes, and also the timing of them as well. I can't remember when the pre-season training kicked off. Was that the start of July? So they would sort of just
Probably
arrived at a good time, and that was one of the things I sort of remember from pre-season. And actually, Mark Bonner sort of mentioned it in our interview with him this week about how it was a good pre-season, got a lot of business done at the right time, get the group together to have to maximise that pre-season as a unit. And I remember, the two being announced either, I think they were the same day. I think it was sort of a couple hours between the two, and Tom and I jumped on a pod either that day or the next day, and very excited about Don Ball, like the profile there. The season before for Leyton Orient was terrific. The fall off this year has been interesting to see, and I know Don Ball wasn't a central figure for Leyton Orient in terms of starts. I think he had a lot of sort of substitute appearances, but it had a really good season. It had like a terrific, CV coming to us. Also, that little story arc about him, getting his first sort of professional start or appearance in the Football League with us on loan. So yeah, it was just a really, really exciting day because both those names came in, and I know Purrington didn't then go on to maybe have the season that we were thinking he would have at the time, but both felt like really very very, very good signings, very kind of experienced, and sort of changed the dial a little bit on sort of the players that we're bringing in, and dare I say more sort of reliable players coming in.
I think with those 3 transfers, the timing of all of them was amazing, because the summers before, we'd been so kind of stuttering in our signings, and they were announced quite late during the summer, and I don't think they'd had enough time with the squad. So like there was like proactivity in that summer which really made a difference, and I think like it was the first time in quite a few years there'd been a kind of buzz around fans where we're making not just early signings but the right signings, like from, you know, people in and around our level, and, you know, players with experience. So I think it was like a really kind of exciting summer for the first time in a number of years.
Well, maybe the one player that kind of bucks that point, which I agree with, might be the goalkeeper, because when we signed Jake Eastwood on the 10th of July, and a little note here that the 30th of June, Marco Morosi signs for Port Vale, which Jord's put in the running order.
I put in the running order because looking back at news articles on BBC Sport to refresh myself of what happened in the summer, that was tagged as Cambridge United news. I guess because he was with us. I think we offered him a contract. I don't know if that was confirmed.
Maybe.
A lot of the sort of the mumblings at the time were, yeah, he's had the contract offer from us.
Well, in the 120 minutes he'd played for us, we thought he was brilliant.
The Messiah, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then we signed Jake Eastwood on the 10th of July, and it's fair to say he didn't come with the best of reviews. How did you feel about it at the time? Because it was such a vital position for us to fill, and it felt a touch risky. Obviously, it's paid off, but
yeah, I mean, we operate in a weird circle, doing a podcast, a fan-led podcast, surrounded by other fan-led podcasts, and you get, you know, comments from fans on transfer things posted on X, and all of it was pretty damning. I think, you know, there wasn't much good to be said about Eastwood, and I think it was one of those. We've had a few goalkeeper tribulations over our time in the Football League, and I think it felt like one of those, surely this can't be the man who's going to, you know, take us to the next level, even in League Two.
I think there was a chat like, is he actually going to be? Yeah. Is he number 1 or number 2 here? Because I think it was Rochdale fans specifically. I remember there
were 2 videos I seem to remember on X that kept getting sort of circulated or posted to us.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Not for Eastwood, because they were like blunders.
Yeah, pretty bad. Yeah. But he'd not really played a lot of games. I think that's the point that Harris has made a lot of times throughout his career, that like for a guy who's 27, 28, I think he is, he's not actually played a massive bulk of games. And obviously that was a signing that ended up paying off. A little bit later on in July, 25th of July, we make probably our marquee signing. I think it's fair to say. I'm going to give it to you, Tom. Of course I am. Look, I don't want to rehash the conversation about Mpanzu, and I don't want to talk about that. But just at the time, it's fair to say this was the marquee signing of the summer, and it did move the dial this summer in terms of my personal expectations on the season.
Yeah, I think there's a decent argument to make. It's probably like the standout signing we've made. Just off the top of my head, maybe since like a Wes.
Yeah, maybe.
Like for obvious reasons, like we're not, and we weren't and won't be a big fish in the League One pond, because like who we're obviously coming up against, clubs we compete with, etc., which we've done to death over the years. But so that means that, you know, naturally the signings that we were making weren't necessarily as eye-catching at the level as maybe other clubs were. Just for like so many reasons, I do think this moved the dial. I know that. The Not the Top 20 boys have mentioned a couple of times. I think they recorded their 1-24s the day before Pelly signed, and then they had a bit of a maybe we might have misjudged them a bit, and that like it was a statement signing across the entire division. Like I remember at the time there was a lot of fans of, you know, League One clubs and certainly League Two clubs who were like, how have they done that? You know, because I think as well, because he's a player that, because we obviously came up against Luton about 30 times a season at one point.
Yeah.
And obviously Pelly Ruddock was a big part of that, big part of the title race that happened in the conference, or well, maybe it's a bit of a stretch to call it a title race by the time that Pelly Ruddock joined them, because I think they're about 12 points clear. But you know, and in League Two as well, and then you see what he achieved since then, like going up the divisions with Luton, playing. I think he scored a penalty in the playoff final, maybe, but he certainly started. Made Premier League appearances, and you're like, that's a serious like calibre of signing to be making. And at that point, I think, if memory serves me correctly, I might be misremembering things a little bit, but I feel like at that point, because we'd made a pretty decent start to our business, I think we're all pretty happy with Ben Knight. We also just mentioned Don Ball and Ben Purrington. Obviously Eastwood, all right, maybe might not have grabbed the headlines as much, and, you know, probably wasn't as positive, but it felt like we made good early tracks on our business, and then it took a little while for the next things to fall into place. And as soon as you see it's Pelly Rudder that signed, you're like, wow. And then particularly because Don Ball had signed just a couple of weeks before, or a few weeks before, you were like, we're going to go into a League Two season with Don Ball and Pelly Rudder as our central midfielders. Now, earlier in the season, than maybe the sort of run in, that didn't quite work out the way we thought it might. But on paper, in July, you look at that and you go, if that was like Colchester that had done that, you'd be like, they're going to go up automatically.
I think that's the point, isn't it? That like, forget the outcome of it. That other fans really like sat up and took notice of this signing, and it did move the dial a little bit. It's probably a shame it happened a little bit later. Obviously, didn't have a full pre-season, which is important to mention.
It also, for the first time, made me think about budget.
Yeah,
because Don Ball,
when
he announced, I think we were thinking, okay, well, he's obviously not come cheap, but if that's your one signing that's that kind of profile, then fair enough. But yeah, when Pelly joined, I was naturally very excited. I thought the two centre midfield partnership would be great. Obviously, the early parts of the season proved difficult for them as a duo. Towards the end, though, they really turned it around. But yeah, the announcement comes, and you think, oh, actually, maybe we are going for it here, and we are going to try and go back for promotion, try and get back into League One, and actually, we're probably going to have that bigger budget in the league compared to others. We found out recently that we had the 7th largest budget. This was the first moment where I thought, oh, actually, we are a bigger profile, a bigger fish in this league. But my favourite thing when Pelly signed was someone on X, I can't remember who it was, again, great content. Someone posted, call up Ben Strang and sack him again. And it just, and you know what, a year on, I still think about that and I still chuckle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, how would Ben Strang have felt about signing a number 9 who doesn't score many goals? That's what happened on the 29th of July. It's only 3-4 days before the season started, which I kind of hadn't quite realised how close to the season starting we still didn't have our number 9, which was, we've talked about the number 9 position for years. Probably every fan of every club talks about goal scorers, and they're hard to find. Louis Appere is the man who wears the number 9 shirt. 29th of July, he signs the same day as Shane McLaughlin actually as well. Swindle, with Appere, when he's announced, was it underwhelming for you?
Yeah, 100%. There wasn't loads known about him, and not a name that kind of jumped out, especially pretty hard shift when, as we've just spoken about, we've signed Pelly, and then you have to follow that, and it's not a marquee signing, and as you say, just a couple of days before the season starts, it can't help but feel like a bit of a rushed signing and maybe a bit of a panic signing. And I think there was it's a horrible job to have as a striker. There's so much pressure on it, and we've been blessed in recent years. I say recent years, but when you've had like Paul Mullen and Joe Ironside hammering in goals, and then suddenly you're lacking, an out and out striker, and the likes of Sam Smith are there, and then suddenly you get Appere, who's low on goals in his career and not done loads at the level that we're at. It will feel like a bit of a disappointment and a bit of a damp squib maybe. And I think, as you say, 4 days before the season starts and getting a player like that in, it does feel a little bit like maybe we've just kind of settled for it, and I think alarm bells will have kind of been ringing for fans there, because we've been at this level before, and and we've come up from it, but it is kind of imperative at this level, or so we thought, to have a 15 goal at least a year striker if you're going to go up automatically.
Well, it's the one thing we didn't have that every other team basically in the top half had.
We had Loft.
Brilliant.
It's worth remembering as well that I think it was just a couple of days before Appere signed. I think it was after the Charlton pre-season game. It was like basically mentioned that Lavery, his recovery had taken a bit of a step back, or he'd maybe just picked up another injury. So at that point, you're like, we are like,
when it is Loft. Genuinely, at that point, it is Loft.
Basically, and you're thinking like, and I think a lot of I know Swindle, your panic monitor must have been going into overdrive at that point, and fair enough, because
he's panicking now. It's the 23rd of May.
Because I think particularly with centre forwards, because it is for every club obviously, because they're the ones that score the goals, they're the ones that win you games at the end of the day. But it feels like for us specifically, because of all the how many seasons, how many transfer windows have we been through where it's been just sign a decent durable centre forward, and you're like, Ryloft is one of those things, and decent's not one of them, unfortunately. But it's for all the hard work, for all the good for all the good business we've done with Pelly Ruddock, Don Ball, Purrington, obviously, we obviously had high hopes for. You're like, are we seriously going to start the first game of the season with Ryan Loft up front? And you're like, as much as like you're trying to be positive and you're trying to go into a division thinking we can really make a dent on the top end of it, pun intended, I guess, the top end of our sort of team was seriously lacking. I think with Apparay, like I think the thing when we signed him, it was more, this seems okay, but I think a lot of people were like, who's next?
Yeah,
him plus another, wasn't
Yeah,
it? It's like, Apparay's going to come in. The reviews are, he's the Labrador. He works hard.
Yeah,
him alongside someone is going to be your front two. And it was like, well, where is that other person? And I can't remember if the Harry Smith rumours had started by that point, or they were a little bit later.
I think that was a saga that rumbled on throughout July. I'm pretty sure
because it kind of ended a week or two before we played them, didn't it?
Yeah. And then he did his ACL a couple of weeks after that. So, but no, it's worth saying, with Apparay, it's worth also saying that I guess we're kind of convincing ourselves a little bit, but he had one promotion from this division before. He's done it twice now with Northampton. He'd won it. He played a lot of games that year. Not necessarily the out-and-out goal scorer, but I think he must have been partnered with Hoskins, I imagine. Tom, I'm looking at you. But he'd been partnered with someone anyway, as a point. So you're right that we thought there was another one. We should mention Elias Kachunga here. Is obviously a striker. Jord's pulled a great face there. Anyway, look, let's move on to the actual football. So August, I'll read through the results for August. Opening day, beat Cheltenham 1-0. Go to Swindon, lose 3-2. Bit of a mad game that you just mentioned there, Jord. Go to Bristol Rovers in the Ver2. Beat them 2-0. Draw 1-1 at home with Harrogate. Beat Colchester 2-1 on the Tuesday night. Lose at Bristol Rovers in the league. And beat Charlton in the Ver2. I think, was that the game that McConnell scored? No, that was the Luton game, wasn't it? And then Newport 2-0 at home in the league to wrap up the month.
CUFC scored against Charlton.
Yeah, and Zach Bradshaw scored.
Zach Bradshaw played really well in both of those cup games. And I remember there being a general call to, we've not seen him for a long time, have we? Let's rewind to the opening day. George, we'll start with you. Like, how are we feeling going into that first game? Try and take us back to that sunny August afternoon.
I remember more than anything from that day just thinking, God, how easy this was. And I think at the time we had clocked that our opening set of fixtures, especially at home, so Newport and Harrogate were in there as well. Yeah. It's like, actually, we're playing like three of the fancied teams at the wrong end. Just remember thinking it was a bit beachy, a bit easy. I think Ben Knight looked really exciting. He had a free kick in front of the NRE, which was very close to going in, and what I maybe didn't think too much about then, which became more of a thing later on in the season, is, well, it was only 1-0. Of everything I've just said about how easy it was and the chances, and I don't know if Don Ball missed a sitter with a header. I didn't really sort of clock. I thought, the goals will come, and actually sort of left that game thinking, we are in a good spot here. That's my opening day recollections.
And your number 9 scores as well on debut. It's not a bad opening day. You mentioned those easier fixtures, easier looking kind of fixtures. The home game next up in the league is Harrogate. Swindon, this is a point you've made a few times throughout the season, and I think I'm not misremembering that even at the time we thought those 2 points that we dropped that day would come back to bite us, which is weird to say third game of the season. But it's true. Like, 1 point that we took off Harrogate over 2 games.
Don't wind
100%. It's true, though. And it was the nature of that game. That first 45 minutes, I still think, is probably one of the best 45 minutes of football we've played all season. We absolutely dominated it. We were playing lovely football over the park, and we should have been 2 or 3 up at half time.
And how funny that we're going to say those same things in a bit when we talk about April. How many times in the season, Chesterfield at home even in December, like how many times throughout the season has that been true?
We were guilty quite a few times this season, basically reiterating what you just said, of like we managed games very well, but not being able to put teams to bed. And we saw it, we'll talk about it at length later, I'm sure, but the Easter weekend's another one where it makes you shudder, just not being able to put teams to bed and managing games absolutely brilliantly, but not having that killer instinct. And I think it does come down to the lack of a cutting edge up top. I think, we suffered with it all season. I think we played brilliantly as a unit, but you look at our top goal scorers and it's kind of spread out across the team rather than someone leading the line. I think if we had that killer instinct to put a game, 2-0 up against Harrogate, that game's done and dusted. And then, they scored early in the second half in that game, and it just went on and on and on, and the game kind of fizzled out because, Harrogate had a game plan and executed it pretty well, but we just didn't offer enough. And the changes that we brought on that day, it kind of was a bit of a wake-up call because, we've gone past the Swindon game, but I think in that game was a bit of a wake-up call that League Two isn't going to be a walk in the park. I think Jordan was right about the opening day. It's so straightforward and so kind of brilliantly managed, and a clean sheet, great platform to build on, etc. But it did just feel a little bit like maybe we need to have a look at ourselves, and maybe we're a couple of people short still at that point.
It was just such an unusual feeling, the Cheltenham game, the Harrogate first half, the Newport game. Of you spent the last 3-4 seasons at the other end of the table, playing really difficult games, even when you're playing those that are around you, and it being really close and really tight. To then just have sort of 3 examples in a row at home. Admittedly, the away games were different, where they were not walkovers, but they were just a different end of the scale of what you'd seen at the Abbey for the last couple of years, where every game was a war, even when you're playing sort of the teams the same size as you. It was a bit of a sort of a culture shock, and I think those home games, I don't know, that I hadn't during pre-season thought much of our chances or us as contenders, but those first few games, probably wrongly because they were lower ranking teams, kind of sort of did make me start sort of re-questioning how well we're going to do in this league, and that mid-table prediction that I had was that too negative, and actually we should be looking sort of top 6 or 7 based on the quality that's around us in the league.
Well, definitely, but for a different reason to that, I think the Colchester game is the one that really stands out of these ones here. To go 1-0 down and by half time have turned it around, by the way, and then to manage the game as we did second half. Tom, that for me is the first one that I guess I really stood up and took notice of, okay, there's something here for sure.
Yeah, because Colchester are also not title favourites, but they were tipped to do okay.
Yeah.
And obviously they gave us a good game at the Abbey later on in the season, and decent side. Obviously didn't trouble the playoffs too much at the end, but to go there and win it felt like a bit of a statement, I think. Tuesday night curse and all that, and I think you're right. I think the fact that we turned it round, and I think the sort of early part of the season was the results were a little bit sort of stuttering, but it did feel like there was a real realisation about the sort of level of opposition that we're playing against. Because we weren't good at the start of that game, and we go behind, and I think we scored 2 goals in about 3 minutes.
Right on half time.
We just showed enough quality, and that was where I had a reasonable amount of confidence going into the season that we'd do fairly well. Didn't expect to go up automatically, but I thought we'd be in and amongst the top end of the table. Just because I think we forgot League Two, in essence, we've done well to get promoted, of course, and we were a good side. But there's not many good sides in it, and we just had that extra little bit of quality to turn games around when we needed. And Colchester was a good example of that. And I think we needed a game like that as well. There's another universe where you beat Harrogate and you draw at Colchester. It's the same return, but I think the month of August was better for going away and beating Colchester than if it had happened that way round. Obviously full away and that sort of thing. And after the season that we'd had the year before, where I think a lot of people were rightly quite fed up with some of the players who, some of them were still in that team and still, very much jury out for. It was just good to see him deliver on a night like that, really in front of so many fans. And again, just with one or two of the other results we've had, probably later on in the season, it was a bit of a statement of all right, Colchester are tipped to go okay, but we're better than them. We're better than that, and that's obviously how it turned out.
One last quick thing on that Colchester night, because it was a brilliant night. But one thing that became really apparent that night, which maybe we'd seen in the games prior to it, I can't remember, but set piece goals, which would come on to be such a key theme for 3/4 of the season. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a really good point, and it's also the point about not just set piece goals, but something we struggled with recently: defenders scoring goals, defenders contributing. There's so many times this season. You look at Kel Watts and Job scored in that game, and also another thing about that month is how well James Brophy played in those games. He was a really important player for us in the early start of the season, and just took like a duck to water. Really, he'd had some critics his whole way through his time with Cambridge United, and we know he's played an incredible amount of games over the past 5 years that he's been with us, and been a great servant, and deserves the plaudits when he gets them, because he came out of what was quite a difficult time for him, I think, and really kind of repaid the faith that was shown in him, and in that month of August was massive. I think he scored 3 goals in the month, and was just League Two was his level, and he really kind of showed that.
And I guess a bit of credit to Harris in that he said it himself that he's managed to get goals out of him and get returns out of him in a way that other managers hadn't, which had obviously been the long-running criticism. Let's move on to September. Results that month are 1-0 loss at home to Oldham. We wouldn't lose at home in the league again until April, pretty sure I'm right in saying. Grimsby away 1-1. Fleetwood at home 2-1 win. Again, another turnaround there. Fulham away in the Carabao Cup. Tranmere away a 0-0 draw. That's one that can inspire a sigh from Tom Walker in the corner over there. There's actually really hard this month to make like a sweeping statement about anything, because we were at this point in the season defined by our inconsistency, because there's some good things to go out here for sure, but then there's also the other side of the coin, and I think probably the 2 away games that kind of sort of exemplify that the best are Grimsby away and Tranmere away, which it's worth saying the 1st of September Adam Mayer signs as well. I think it's the last signing of the window for us, pretty sure. Scores on his debut at Grimsby. Tom, I think at that point that was the best performance of the season in terms of how we'd gone up there, because they were a fancied side, Grimsby. They'd started really well, and we went up there, played brilliantly, looked like we were just seeing the game out. Kwasi gives away a penalty in the last minute. Eastwood actually saves the pen, obviously, but the rebound goes in. And then Tranmere is kind of the flip of that, where we go and approach an away game against a bad side and never really look like we want to score. You knew from 5 minutes into that game it was going to be 0-0. And I think what was frustrating in that period is, forget the results, they're both draws, but there was a frustration in that we knew maybe we were a bit of a better side, but Harris kind of had the handbrake on a little bit, was I guess what we would be saying.
Yeah. God, Tranmere away.
That was a terrible afternoon of football.
Miserable afternoon in Birkenhead, as it often is, I guess. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think the problem in these first 2 months really was just that word inconsistency. Because even though we've been pretty positive about how we started the season, right at the beginning of those first few games, even in August, you kind of follow up a really good away win at Colchester with a miserable defeat at Bristol Rovers, which obviously aged like milk as the season went on, and we found out how good or how bad, I guess, Bristol Rovers were. And it's the same in this month really, and let the, without winning either game at Grimsby or at Tranmere, it's like, yeah, like I think for a section of our fan base, it was still slightly on the fence probably about Harris, because of obviously stuff that had happened that's been well documented in the past. This was a lot of people's concern. I think basically what we saw at Tranmere was, all right, we kind of understand what we're going to be like at the back. We're going to be built around hopefully a solid defence, which obviously did turn out to be, but like, what can you do to go and win games of football and turn 1s into 3s, which obviously we talked about so many times during the lockdown promotion year, and I guess we have done, throughout this season as well. But at Tranmere away, you just felt like there's a level of quality that we've got, but are we using it? And probably the answer was no. Like, that game was just horrendous. I mean, it was one of those where, like you said, right from the beginning, you knew it was going to be 0-0, but right at the end, you'd totally forgotten it.
Do you think that what happened in the Grimsby game influenced how Harris / the team approached the Tranmere game? Kind of burnt by a horrible, last minute equaliser at Grimsby. Do you think there was a bit of a mentality thing, like, we can't go there and let that happen again? So it kind of, like you said, the handbrake was on. It did seem tentative, and maybe there was a kind of, we need to approach these away games a little less gung-ho, which is a shame, because we played, as you guys said, so well in the Grimsby one.
Did the handbrake go on because he punched someone in the tunnel after Grimsby? It's like, guys, I can't do any last minute draws. I'll get in more trouble.
No, I think there's something in that though. It's worth remembering that Grimsby game though. It wasn't like we went out and were massively attacking, but we got our game plan spot on that day, and we knew how to have a threat against them.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think we should have come out of that with 3 points. And but there was something like, okay, that performance is something to really go out with that performance. Early at that point in the season, you can look at a performance over points a bit more. And there was so much to go out with that Grimsby performance. Mayer was fantastic that day as well on his debut, like really exciting to see him. And then the Tranmere thing is just the exact opposite, as Tom's just said. And I think that kind of the way it bookended the month was the frustration. And it was kind of, I think at that point, maybe justifying a lot of our predictions pre-season, which was mid-table, like decent, but probably not good enough, consistent enough. And that is kind of what we were at that point. Jord, we should talk about an aside, Fulham away.
Lovely.
I mean, I'd kind of forgotten all about this
You're
night.
a kind man. You give Tom Tranmere and me Fulham away.
Or I'm really
Excellent.
harsh on Tom. He loves the misery. Look at him.
I get Birkenhead. You get
West London.
Sunny Putney.
Yeah, what a night. Really classic, old school feeling ground. I know obviously like some of the stands are really, really the opposite of that and very modern now. But that walk from the pub that we were in along the river through a park to the away end was, I think it was either you or Casper was saying, this feels like England away. It feels like we're sort of in like a different country, and there's like this plaza and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely heroic night. I remember the lineup was quite a few changes in there.
Shane Lavery starts.
Corey Smith starts. Liam Bennett, was he a starter at that point? He must have been. Or was Gibbo starting?
Yeah, Bennett did, because he got a lot of credit.
He got so much praise from Fulham fans, didn't he? Yeah,
because they started Kevin that night, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well, no, exactly right. Yeah, Kevin, Smith Rowe, Adama Traore and Jimenez were their front four.
It's not bad, is it?
It's not bad.
I think, again, inconsistency was probably the theme, I guess, of the sort of first part of the season. Because, I mean, Fulham away, we were good. Obviously, there's a bit of disappointment in there, I guess, that you don't get the moment to equalise or go ahead earlier in the game or anything. So I got a little side eye at Jord there, because I knew what he was thinking. Joe Ironside, all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was a game again. Like we talk about levels, It also showed the kind of depth that we had in the squad as well. Like Fulham weren't gung ho, all out, like all guns blazing. They weren't at their best. They didn't need to be. They've obviously got enough quality that they not necessarily just turn up, but they don't need to be their best to beat a League Two team, which at the time was sort of mid-table-ish. But we were so good, and it was players like Corey Smith coming back in, and obviously a lot of the first part of the season was built around the midfield too, of Pelly Ruddock and Don Ball. And then you're like, oh yeah, we've got Corey Smith as well, who's played in the Championship and played in the top end of League One. Won promotion from League One recently with Derby. I think did McLaughlin play that night as well? Yeah. It's the same thing. You're like, we've actually got a really decent squad.
Yeah.
And when push comes to shove, they played really well that night. I mean, the cups were pretty good for us, to be fair. To get a couple of decent wins, and obviously,
Prem team away, Birmingham at home. Third round in the FA Cup. Yeah, we did knockouts at the Virtu.
And I mentioned it about the Colchester game. I think it's similar with Fulham. Like, you do need those sort of occasions just to get everyone back on side a little bit after a season or seasons, like we'd kind of been through, because and particularly away from home, obviously the Abbey has obviously its capacity, so we can only sell so many tickets, right? But our away support throughout the season was very good in terms of the numbers, the amount of away ends we were selling out throughout the season and stuff. But it would have been quite easy and quite understandable if people had been like, do you know what, probably not going to make the effort. And 5,000 fans there putting that sort of performance, I think it does just help to just sort of bring people back a little bit.
I think that's a really good point, by the way. There's so many, just speaking anecdotally, of people that I know who kind of keep an eye on United, but not really. This was the sort of game where they were like, oh, I'll come to Fulham, definitely. And they come along. And then how much of an impact do you think that might have had later in the season? Because you can then think that they have a great night, 5,000 travelling fans, hold a Premier League team for, you're in the game up until the very, very last kick of the game. And then that's probably something that stays in their mind. And then when later in the season you've got big promotion games, do you know what I mean? It's just the way it sort of helps boost that whole atmosphere around the club that at the time probably felt a bit intangible. It's only on looking back that you can really make that connection. So I think that's a good point, Tom. It's also worth just saying we rotated far more than them. I mean, I'm looking at the lineup. They've got Castagna and Robinson, Tom Kearney, Reed playing and stuff. And our back four is Liam Bennett, Mamadou Jobe, Zeno Ibsen Rossi and Zach Bradshaw. I mean, it's quite mad to go into a game of that against an opposition like that with that back four. But anyway, Let's move on to October. The results were 3-1 win at home to Crawley, another 3-1 win on the Tuesday night against Luton. McConnell scored a banger that night, I'm pretty sure that's the game I'm thinking of. Then a 2-0 loss at Shrewsbury. Don't worry, Tom, you can have that. A 2-1 win at home to Bromley, which aged incredibly. I don't think at the time we didn't quite realise how good a result that was, for obvious reasons. Lose 3-2 at Barnet in the Ver 2. And then a 2-0 loss at Notts County, which I'll come to you for, Swindle, in a minute. Let's start. I think probably worth talking first of all about the Shrewsbury game, because this was a stinker that afternoon. And I think at this point, inconsistency we've spoken about, the other thing that was becoming quite clear was our away record. I think it's only Colchester would have won at this stage away from home. And I'm pretty sure around here you start looking at the league, the away league table, and it's basically the bottom four plus us. And that was what felt like it was really holding us back. Tom, you were there that afternoon. I remember the pod straight after that. It was as close to like I don't want to say crisis pod, but like there was a real negative.
Shrewsbury had started really badly, right?
Really badly.
Like Tranmere weren't
Awful.
in a great league position when we went there, but I feel like Shrewsbury were worse.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it was also like the manner of the goals that we conceded that day as well. Just abysmal. Tranmere away and Shrewsbury away. I've had. I'm glad I got my 2 penneth worth about Fulham, but
when we get to Walsall at home, I'm skipping straight past you, mate.
Yeah, I'll just dip out for the sort of November to April.
Come back when it's Easter, yeah?
Yeah. He rises. Yeah, I mean, like it was, and you know, as much as we were, you know, at the time building up a really, really strong home record, we were being let down by our away form, and it was just another example of us not being able to impose ourselves away from home on like just objectively poor opposition, and it was a concern because again, like we're talking about maybe what our predictions were, or sort of what our ideas were of what a Neil Harris team in League Two might look like, and people's worries were if we're going to fall short, it's because we're not going to be able to impose ourselves on teams, either the good sides, or when we go away from home, are we going to be able to really assert the extra quality that we obviously had? And at this point the answer was quite emphatically no. So like the concerns that people had about why maybe we wouldn't achieve the top end of the league, it might be mid-table or even lower in some cases, people were probably just having that sort of opinion like play out in front of them, and what they're expecting to see was what they were seeing. And yeah, I mean, like, thankfully we managed to turn the away form round, and obviously it was essential that we did that, because like you're never going to get promoted if your away form's as poor as it was for the first sort of 3 or 4 months of the season, really. Shrewsbury away was in the deer. That's probably our worst performance of the season.
I'd say so. We'll talk about this in the awards, I imagine, but I would agree with that 100%. Then the Bromley game, I mean, this is just how weird we were as a side, because you bounce back from that Shrewsbury game, and I think I remember at the time a lot of our discussion was like, okay, yeah, we are playing badly, like kind of regularly, but what we're always doing is bouncing back. And I think that was something that we were clinging on to, that we'd always managed to come back. Was
it something like we didn't have the same result consecutively?
Yeah. Until
quite late into the season. So definitely by this point in October.
It was Salford and Barnet were the first, I think, back-to-back of the same result of any kind. But that Bromley game, we go 2-0 up by half-time. Both the strikers score, Lavery and Kwasi.
Well, we played a front two, which I think was the first time, or was definitely a rarity.
We'd sort of changed, I think, a couple of times. I think the Fleetwood game the month before, I think, is an example where, again, I think it was Lavery came on and scored the winner, which was really important.
No, but we started a front two.
We actually,
that's what I mean. Like at points in games, we'd done it to good effect, and then obviously we did, and we were just talking about imposing ourselves on opposition. Really imposed ourselves on Bromley. You're right, Lavery scores. I think it was one off his arse. Kouassi scored a brilliant goal that day.
We did start 2-up against Shrewsbury, sorry, I just thought I'd say.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Imposing ourselves. Wore a lovely fourth kit as well.
I was going to say, you should mention that. It looked great.
I actually started 2-up against Crawley as well, so we've done it a couple of times. Anyway,
do you want to just ignore everything I said?
What were the front two though? Was Lavery there?
Yeah, it's Lavery and Kwasi in all those games, and I think maybe there was an element of feeling like we'd unlocked something that was going to work. The kit is definitely worth mentioning. Fantastic kit, early kickoff as well. That one, I just don't remember it ever feeling like a big game beforehand. I don't remember thinking like, this is a title challenger we're playing.
Did they do the same as us? Did they just go on a really good run of form, sort of a similar?
I think they did. I
think they certainly weren't top when we played them.
I think at that point they were doing pretty well, but yeah, they'd not I don't think they'd hit the stride like they did sort of towards the Christmas period. And like you're right to say it didn't feel like a significant game really at that point. No. I mean, with respect, Bromley at home in October probably will never feel like a significant game. Maybe it might do next year.
It might do next year, yeah, exactly.
But like, we did our job against a team that we knew were pretty decent. And did it in the sort of way that we needed to see, because we talked to right at the beginning when we were going for our summer recruitment about that forward part of the pitch potentially being a problem. You beat a team at home that are going well, both strikers score. That's a pretty encouraging return.
Was it not until Barnet in November that we actually played for the first time at home a team that we thought were going to be in the sort of
in the mix?
Yeah, in the top 6 picture.
Yeah,
we had quite a generous run of home fixtures pre-Christmas, really, didn't we?
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, we end the month with what obviously in hindsight becomes the turning point for the entire season. Sundar, you had quite the afternoon in Nottingham, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
lost a lot of hair.
Yeah, that was. Well, it's kind of the opposite Samson effect. I cut my hair off, and Cambridge United got really
better.
good. So yeah, if anything, I did them a favour. But yeah, that day was famed for a really fun train journey up, a few beers in the morning and early afternoon. And I decided the time was right to shave my head, so I went and did that.
Which is obviously a normal thing to do.
Normal thing to do. Came back to the pub and then watched an absolutely abject performance by Cambridge United. And you spoke about the Shrewsbury game and the kind of crisis pod. I think when we recorded after Notts County, it was a bit like our away form is going to stop us being able to do anything this year. It's the thing that's just stifling us completely.
Absolutely, and we've talked about it. It's the theme of definitely the early part of the season, but this game really, there's two things for me. It's kind of the tale of two strikers. Firstly, Shane Lavery goes off on 36 minutes. Yeah. Everyone groans in the away end. Everyone's, well, okay, that's obviously predictable. And on the other team, Alessandro Jatta scores 2, wins the game fairly comfortably for Notts County, and you're just looking at it going, okay, not exactly him, but like there's a team who's got a that's the missing piece that that we need. And the other thing is, I remember some people in this away end talking about Harris in a is he the answer? Like, maybe not Harris out. I wouldn't think it's quite as far as that, but there were some question marks building here.
There was chat on the pod, wasn't there, about understanding what Gillingham had seen.
Exactly. Yeah. Suddenly it made a bit more sense, didn't
Casper was not here to defend himself, but I seem to remember he was bringing that topic.
Well, I think it's a fair point to have made, because we all looked at the Gillingham thing and been like, okay, they were 8th, they were just outside the playoffs, and they sack him, and it's like, well, hang on, suddenly you live it and you experience it, and it makes. I don't think anyone in this room were calling for it at that stage, but there was clearly frustrations building. And then, obviously Lavery goes off injured, and then November is really where things start to change. We kick it off with a 3-0 win at home to Chester in the Cup. Beat Brighton in the Virtu. 2 back-to-back 0-0s, 1 at Salford, and then Barnet at home. The Salford one important because we didn't concede a shot on target that day, so we really started to show this proper defensive mettle, which would obviously come to define us. Barrow away, 2-0 win. That's a big game that we'll come to in a second. And then Crewe at home, 2-1 win that Knight scores in, which, again, is very important. Let's start with those back-to-back 0-0s, Tom, because I think, especially looking back on them, they feel like kind of steadying the ship as results, don't they? I'm giving you Tranmere, Shrewsbury and Salford.
Any games with any goals we've scored yet?
He loves it. Look at him. He absolutely loves it.
You're just going to ask me to watch a complete rerun of the 24-25 season. Stockport away.
Actually, they weren't bad results though. They are the both of them.
And on the 11th of November, we went to London Road. Yeah, they were. They were really positive results, really positive performances for different reasons. The Salford one you mentioned there. I mean, our defensive record has obviously been talked about a lot throughout the season for obvious reasons. 33 goals conceded is an incredible stat for any team. And it is a sort of stat that basically guarantees you some level of success. Obviously, thankfully, we were able to get into the top 3. But if you concede 33 goals, you're not finishing below like 5th, are you? Just unless you are truly, truly dire going forward. But what probably doesn't get spoken about enough is that exact thing about like shots on target. Like, you can keep clean sheets and your keeper has a worldie or whatever, and we've seen that a few times, both for and against us. But to go to a team like Salford, who have invested the sort of cash that they have on a squad that they had at the time and have now, and restrict them to literally nothing, it felt at a time like, again, like we're talking about levels, it did feel like, well, we have this ability to just completely shut teams out. And it's another away game where we weren't able to maybe show enough quality in the final third to win it. But against a team like Salford, you're like, that's a really credible way to go and earn a point. Really, just like I might be misremembering slightly, but I think the chat that we had on the pod was like after the Salford game was like, there's 0-0s, there's 0-0s, and Tranmere was a 0-0. But this was a 0-0.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Barnet was a 0-0. But Barnet was a good result, I think, for the reason that at that point, I think unanimously people were like, Barnet are a proper side. They're the best team that have come to the Abbey, and all right, we've not been able to win it. But it's the same thing again. Like, we're talking about restricting a really decent team to very, very little, and just having that confidence and building a platform and such, and you take 2 points off really good teams. Where you look at Notts County, you look at Shrewsbury. Those sorts of games where, without really, the opposition having to show too much, we come out with pretty miserable defeats. Whereas in these games, you're right, it was like right back to basics, shut up shop.
Eastwood made a couple of really good saves in that Barnet game as well.
Yeah, he did.
Because Barnet were a good side and showed quite a lot of attacking intent in that game, and we managed that game well. And Eastwood, made a couple of really big saves in that game.
I remember previewing the Barnet game, and the big conversation at the time was like, this really good defensive team coming up against a really good attacking team. Barnet was scoring for fun. Where's this going to end? Like, who's going to who's going to triumph there? And to shut them out, that was a real indicator. Okay, we've seen for months we've got this good defense, but now it's like, maybe it's a different level. And
do you remember the other thing that happened that game?
Well, what I was going to say about the Barnet game was it was really, really good attendance. It was the first really big home attendance of the year, and we went go on and have lots more. But was it another early kickoff?
Kouassi gets injured that game as well.
Does he?
On 50 minutes. So in basically the space of 2-3 weeks, Lavery's out for 6 weeks, Kouassi's out for 3 months. So you are genuinely, once again, Loft's away, so can't call on him. You're looking at Apre, who himself was just coming back from an injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I seem to remember he starts the Barrow game, but Harris had basically forced him to start the game in a way that maybe other managers wouldn't have done. Him and Kachunga, who obviously have to play their part over the next couple of weeks. But I think at that point, again, the striker conversation just isn't going away, because Tom mentioned they're decent and durable. I think we saw both of Kouassi and Lavery decent at points, but both of them clearly not durable enough.
It's fine, January's coming, right?
We'll
sign a striker in January.
Exactly. And then there's the Barrow game to chat about. So this is the first time we changed shape. This is a really defining game in the season because of what it sort of heralds afterwards. Tom, I'm going to give it to you. Your man Mpanzu scores twice. Our lineup that day, if you're interested, is Eastwood in goal, Job, Watts, Morrison, Bennett, Mayer, wing-backs, and Mpanzu, Smith, Brophy, Apre and McConnell as the front three. Was it just as simple as the change of shape here, or is it also the addition of, I think Harris and Bonner both said that they had their Christmas party after this game? Do you think there's also something in that things just started gelling and clicking in a sort of more intangible way than just the tactics?
Yeah.
Talk to us about Christmas parties, Tom.
Yeah, I would say that in a week where it was announced that we're going to go on a bit of a jolly up to Spain in pre-season, it's quite convenient to say that the Christmas party was the thing that turned up in favour. That's if I'm being diplomatic about it. But yeah, I mean, I think sort of after the Crew game and in the discussions that we had around that, and we didn't review the season in as much detail as obviously we'll do now. But I think I'd kind of categorised it as Notts County being the real turning point, because, and again, it sounds mad, but I guess it's just a sign of how good we were. But going away to Notts County and getting beat 2-0 kind of felt like rock bottom of the season. Shrewsbury was the worst performance, but for all the reasons we've just been through, Notts County felt bad, and then it felt like we got better from there. But like it's a fair point. I mean, look, Harris obviously works with the players obviously much closer than any of us. He knows them much better than anyone really. So yeah, I'm being flippant about the Christmas party thing, but like the reality is he said a lot in his sort of off-season roundup interview that he did a few days ago from the club, that they came back a different group of players. And look, going and beating Barrow, a lot of teams did it throughout the season. That in itself isn't necessarily that impressive. I mean, we needed a win away from home, and we obviously got it. Obviously good that big players turn up in big moments and all that sort of stuff, but if the manager's saying that he felt that they came back as a group that were really like setting their sights on promotion and really setting their sights on going and achieving something, I mean, what followed, and that's kind of as good evidence as really you could ask for, I guess. So, yeah, a defining moment in the season.
And you talk about big players stepping up in big moments. That Crewe game is kind of the start of the emergence of Ben Knight, I would say properly. You rightly said, Jord, that in that first game pre-season as well, when we'd seen Knight, there was a lot of excitement about him as a player. But he'd kind of dropped out of the side quite a lot in that period. Like, hugely massive credit to Harris for how he brought him back in and when he trusted him and his sort of reintegration. I mean, that's probably a bit of a step too far, but you see my point. And how he then started playing and affecting games. Because I remember, I think it might have been the Harrogate game, maybe it was a Newport game, where he came on, and I just remember he was kind of looked like he was hiding from the ball a little bit. It never looked like. I remember feeling really frustrated by it because you know how much quality he's got, and it just looked like he wasn't quite involved in the game enough.
He was guilty in those games of literally standing behind a player. So when one of our players had the ball, he would stand behind one of their players and not show for the ball.
And attacking the NRE,
Exactly.
we see that so clearly.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was almost a mentality thing, never a technical question with Knight. Whereas this Crewe game, he comes on with, 20, 30 minutes to go, sets up the first one for Job to score, and then he picks up the ball, 97th minute, and tucks a pen away.
Long wait for that pen as well.
Long wait for that pen, yeah. And it's a huge moment in the season. It puts us sixth at the end of November. But there's also this, in a moment where these injuries are mounting up, suddenly you see Ben Knight as like a sort of like a beacon of hope almost type thing.
Yeah, I think the latter stages of November, following on from what Tom said about, the team unity and the Christmas party, it was at that point you started to see the resilience in the group coming through, and I can't remember specific games and dates, but it felt like over November and into December we were winning games with a bit of a patched up team. You've got McConnell playing who hasn't played, you've got Knight coming in who hasn't played. There are people there who you would expect to be your starters that just aren't available because the injuries have racked up. And sort of week on week, when we're previewing the games, it was almost kind of this element of like, oh well, this will be the week where we kind of, it all catches up with us and we get that defeat. But credit to a lot of players, McLaughlin, people like that all just sort of Hoddle emerged at that point. Lots of players found themselves with an opportunity and they really grasped it. They really took it. And yeah, Ben Knight is probably like the poster boy for that, because like you were saying, he had dropped out of the team. He very, very quickly was this, this fan favourite, this bright light because of pre-season, literally the first game, Cheltenham. But then the next game, Swindon away onwards, the question started to come up, about him, disappearing in games, not as effective. Does he play in the 10? Does he play out wide? Do we use his right or his left? So lots of questions about him, and just gradually his minutes became less and less. I don't know if probably even dropped out of the matchday squad a couple of times. And then it was alluded to earlier in the pod, but I think it's worth touching on just how well the club has done, and credit to the club for protecting someone who's clearly mentally fragile to an extent, has had difficulties in his career, and has come to us in January, and then instead of trying to sort of rush him into signing a contract or getting him into the team, especially because at the time we could have really done with him because we're in this relegation fight, we sort of almost coached him, groomed him, stuck by him to sort of build him up, and that's continued into this season. And yeah, November was the emergence of it, but December, January, for me, if you say those months, I instantly think of him. I think of his performances. I think of the mad run of goals that he goes on in January, I think it is. But you're right. To answer your question, Crewe was the emergence of Ben Knight, and what a moment it was, tucking that late penalty away.
And you're right about, like you called it, mentally fragile, but maybe inexperienced is definitely something we can agree on, because for a guy who's 23 years old, he'd only played, at that point, I'm saying 20, I think, professional games, one of which obviously for Man City, 10 for Crewe, 4 for Real Murcia, by the way. Little homecoming for him this summer.
Knows the city.
Preston won't have that sort of weapon.
With you're like both right to say this is probably where Ben Knight started to really kind of make his mark. Obviously, he scores the late penalty, which is the headline and the winner, and that's great. It's a really pressure moment, a clutch moment for him. But I actually think the most pleasing thing of this, and again, it's something I've banged on about, and it's just been so evident for the last few months, was I think more than anything, just like the way that the equaliser came about, which obviously Job ends up scoring, is Ben Knight picks up the ball, on the edge of the box, drives towards the goal and takes a shot, and it's like that's the sign of a player who's just playing with a bit of freedom, playing with a bit of like arrogance is the wrong word, but just a bit of like, yeah, I'll give it a try, why not? And that's kind of what you wanted from him, and that's why maybe his minutes were a bit more limited, sort of between that first game of the season and this, basically, because we maybe hadn't seen enough of that. I think for a player of that quality, like the one thing that you want is you want them to be like craving the ball and like desperate for the ball, and just when they get it, just backing themselves, just give it a go. And I can't remember when it was. It might have been after the Barrow game towards the end of the season. It was one of them. I remember just thinking, like, if you're Ben Knight, like, you want to see him being kind of arrogant. 'Cause it's like, who are you going to pass it to is like as good as you? Like, realistically.
Definitely.
So, like, do it yourself. And that, so for me, that was the most encouraging thing, just for him to come on, bit of an old-fashioned cliche, but kind of take the game by the scruff of the neck and really kind of, you know, kick on was pretty good too.